Welcome, focus learners, to this explainer. If you're prepping for the GCSE Edexcel thematic study on migrants in Britain, well, you're in exactly the right place. I'm your host, and today we're executing a zero-digression, rapid-fire review of 1,200 years of migration history to Britain. We're going straight to the facts, straight to the concepts, and absolutely straight to what you need to know. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our exact battle plan for the next 10 minutes. We'll start with an introduction to the core themes. Then we march chronologically through 4 eras: medieval England, the early modern period, the industrial era, and finally modern Britain. After that, we'll pull the whole shebang together in the big picture so you know exactly how to structure a top-tier exam answer.
Section 1. Introduction, the exam trap and core themes. Now, there's a massive exam trap that catches students out every single year, and we're going to avoid it right now. Look, this thematic study isn't just a simple history of immigration policy. If you write an essay just listing out laws, you're going to miss the point entirely. The examiner is actually looking for your grasp of 2 overarching themes that run through every single historical period we'll cover. Number 1 is the context for migration. Basically understanding the push factors, why people fled their homes, and the pull factors, what drew them specifically to Britain, alongside where they actually ended up settling. Number 2 is experience and impact. This means looking at how they were treated by the government and society and the tangible, real-world difference they made to British culture, the economy, and the built environment. Every single era we examine today will be measured against those 2 specific core threads.
Moving right along to Section 2, Medieval England, covering roughly the year 800 to 1500.
So, medieval England was actually deeply connected to the wider world. It drew in Vikings, Normans, Jews, and countless European traders and craftsmen. England's growing wool industry and expanding towns created genuine economic opportunities. And this brilliantly illustrates that point. Taking a look at this incredible 10th century Viking silver hoard, the Vale of York hoard, this wealth physically demonstrates those vast Viking period trade connections. It makes the city of York an absolutely crucial case study for your exam, serving as a city that thrived as a truly international trading hub under Viking influence.
But beyond trade, there was a huge ideological pull factor, and you absolutely need to nail down this concept: Christendom. Christendom refers to the wider European Christian network. Being part of this network plugged England directly into international trade and cultural exchange. It acted as a massive magnet for medieval migrants, particularly skilled craftsmen and churchmen who were seeking economic and social mobility in these rapidly growing towns.
So the crucial point is how these migrants were actually categorized and treated. The strict legal definition you must know is alien. In medieval England, an alien was a distinct legal category for migrants that strictly shaped their rights, their taxes, and how they were handled by the monarchy. During massive disruptions, like the Black Death, for example, this specific legal status fundamentally defined the migrant experience, often making them incredibly vulnerable to changing royal whims.
We also have to look at the lasting impact, and the concept of the Danelaw is absolutely essential here. The Danelaw refers to the massive regions of northern and eastern England that were visibly and permanently reshaped by Viking settlement, language, and culture. But hey, a quick warning for your exam: do not lump all medieval migrants together. The Vikings who established the Danelaw, the Normans who conquered the country, and the Jewish communities invited in by the crown for finance, they all had entirely different experiences and left entirely different legacies.
All right, Section 3, the early modern era, from 1500 to 1700. In this era, the pattern of England attracting people fleeing hardship while bringing valuable skills just continues to grow. We see the arrival of Flemish and Walloon migrants settling in Sandwich and Canterbury, plus new arrivals from continental Europe and Africa as global trading really expanded. Taking a look at William Hogarth's engraving, The Fellow Prentices at Their Looms, we see a depiction of the booming Spitalfields silk weaving trade in London. This trade was actively built up by Huguenot refugees. You see, they didn't just arrive, they brought highly specialized, highly valuable skills that significantly boosted the English economy. Migrants in this period were active economic builders.
To really understand the Huguenots, you've got to understand the religious shifts of the time. Comparing the two, on one side, a changing, increasingly Protestant England was actively drawing skilled people in. But on the other side, Catholic France was engaging in severe religious persecution, and this persecution acted as an intense push factor, essentially driving French Protestants, the Huguenots, out of their homes and toward the safety of England.
On to Section 4, the Industrial Era, spanning the 1700s to the 1900s.
In this period, the massive engine of the British Empire, relentless labor demands, and severe global crises caused the scale of migration to literally explode. Now, what's really interesting here is comparing two very distinct migrant experiences side by side. On one hand, you have famine-driven Irish migration, a desperate push factor that transformed cities like Liverpool. On the other hand, you have places like Petticoat Lane Market, the heart of the Jewish East End in London, which was populated by migrants fleeing violent persecution in Eastern Europe. For your exam, comparing these two distinct experiences, one driven by starvation, the other by persecution, is a fantastic way to show a really deep historical understanding.
Let's quickly summarize the massive structural transformations of this era. First, you've got the Industrial Revolution demanding endless labor. Then, you have transatlantic slavery and the growth of the British Empire fundamentally reshaping Britain's global connections. But crucially, you also have the rise of the mass media. Newspapers began wielding incredible power to either inflame public prejudice against migrants or build up public sympathy. Basically, public relations became a defining factor of the migrant experience.
Which brings us to Section 5, Modern Britain, from the year 1900 all the way to the present day.
Now, this turbulent century brought two world wars, decolonization, and the birth of modern multicultural Britain, including vital case studies like Migrants in Bristol and the arrival of Asian migrants in Leicester. Let's move forward and see how this builds with the HMT Empire Windrush. This iconic ship marks the start of large-scale Commonwealth migration to Britain after the Second World War. These arrivals, alongside refugees and asylum seekers, answer the call to help rebuild fractured public services, like the NHS, and jumpstart the post-war economy.
But you know, the modern experience was also defined by intense legislative battles. Tracking through the 20th century, in 1905, the Aliens Act sought to restrict immigration. Fast forward to 1948, the British Nationality Act affirmed the rights of Commonwealth citizens to settle. And then by 1965, the landmark Race Relations Act attempted to outlaw discrimination. So you can clearly see anti-immigration movements violently clashing with equal rights movements to shape the modern legal framework of Britain.
Finally, Section 6, the big picture, structuring your essay.
We've just rapidly covered 1,200 years. So, how do you actually structure an exam answer that spans across these centuries without just retelling a boring chronological story? Well, if you get a question asking, how far did the experience of migrants change, you need a strategic approach, and the secret is to use these 4 threads. Institutions, like the government and church, religion, economic influences, and attitudes in society. Do not just write a paragraph on the medieval era and then a paragraph on the industrial era. No way! Instead, pick one of these threads, let's say attitudes in society, and trace how it evolved from the Vikings all the way to the Windrush generation. And remember the golden rule here. Attitudes never moved in a simple straight line of progress from hostile to welcoming. It was always complex, shifting back and forth based on the economy and the media. I'm going to leave you with this exact exam-style question to ponder. How far did attitudes towards migrants in Britain change between c1500 and c1900? Think about the context and experience framework we just mastered. Consider the Huguenots, the Irish in Liverpool, and the Jewish community in the East End. Did attitudes actually change, or did the reasons for prejudice just shift around? Apply what you've learned here, and you are well on your way to securing a top grade. Keep studying, and we'll see you next time.